So this drama kicks off with someone dramatically falling off a lighthouse into the ocean, right? A guy is falling off a lighthouse into the ocean thinking, how did things go so horribly wrong? Cut to the present, Lin Bei-shing, a 30-year-old woman, wakes up in a panic because she's late for work. Her mom insists she eats breakfast, but Bei-shing declares that she'll eat on the way. Fighting through the morning crowd, she manages to get on the bus, checks her phone, and tragedy number 2 hits. A notification reminds her that her longtime boyfriend, Zhan Yu, the very man she was supposed to marry in 10 days, has dumped her. His reason? Feelings just aren't the same anymore. Bei-shing had been crushing on Zhan Yu since school, so naturally she was shaken. She has no idea how to break the news to her family or friends, but capitalism doesn't pause for heartbreak. She reaches work, which is a zoo. Not only does she have an office job, but she also has to wear animal costumes and entertain kids. After work, she pathetically tries to call Zhan Yu again, and she gets zero response from him. She sends tearful voice notes and then gets drunk by the sea yelling about her misfortunes. A wise old man who walks up and in the most mysterious way possible asks, "Did your wedding get canceled?" Bei-shing, understandably freaked out, demands to know how he knew. The old man simply explains that only heartbroken women come here. Bei-shing declares that she will win Zhan Yu back, but before she can run off, the old man shoves a fishing rod in her hands and cryptically advises her to let go because she'll never be happy with Zhan Yu anyway. The real person she should be with, she left them far behind. Before she can process this nonsense, she turns around and the old man has vanished. Bei-shing stumbles home, only to get yelled at by her mom, who is furious that she's been out all night while there's a whole wedding to plan. Bei-shing, smiling like a woman who definitely isn't spiraling, heads to her room, still thinking about the old man. Then, she has an idea, and she grabs her old school uniform and ancient phone, takes a photo, and sends it to Zhan Yu. She tells him that if he shows up tomorrow at their school in uniform, she will forgive everything and pretend the breakup never happened, because that's healthy. The next day, dressed in her school uniform, Bei-shing eagerly waits at the school, convinced Zhan Yu will come. Hours pass, no sign of him. Just as she's about to delete his messages in defeat, suddenly dark clouds gather, rain starts pouring. Suddenly, a guy, Zhang Wansen, appears out of nowhere and covers her with an umbrella. And hold up, isn't this the same guy who fell off the lighthouse? But Bei-shing, too consumed with her Zhan Yu obsession, barely notices him, because Zhan Yu finally shows up in his school uniform. Bei-shing sprints toward him, practically screaming, "I knew you'd come!" But Zhan Yu jerks his hand away and steps back, saying, "How many times do I have to tell you to stay away from me? Do you have no self-respect?" And with that, he walks away. Bei-shing, utterly shattered, decides to head home, but wait for a signboard that says 2010. Turns out, just by deleting a single message, she time-traveled back to the past. And the worst part? She had just been talking to 2010's Zhan Yu, but because she's too busy being heartbroken, she doesn't even notice. She boards a bus, lost in thought, only to realize that Wansen is also in the same bus. He is giving stalker vibes, holding out an umbrella. He says, "You'll get drenched." Bei-shing, still in shock, takes it without question. Stepping outside, she recalls the old man who had cryptically told her she had left her happiness behind. But when she turned, there was no one, and she headed to her home. Meanwhile, Wansen watches her walk away like she's the only reason he exists. Back home, Bei-shing absent-mindedly places Wansen's umbrella somewhere, completely unaware that her house has changed too. She heads straight to her room, now a typical anime-obsessed Asian teenager's paradise, and cries herself to sleep. Then, her old phone starts buzzing wildly with texts. Next morning, she wakes up, back in the present. One of her friends messages her, asking about wedding preparations. Bei-shing, still disoriented, lies through her teeth that everything's fine. Her friend says she'll come to pick her up, and Bei-shing, confused, asks, when exactly? The friend reminds her that she mentioned in the group chat last week that she is coming because of that incident. When Bei-shing opens the chat, she spots that guy, Wansen, the umbrella dude. Now curious, she asks her friend about him. The friend laughs. "Wow, Bei-shing, how could you forget school topper Wansen?" "Well, it's possible because you were always too busy orbiting around Zhan Yu." Shocked, Bei-shing rushes outside to find the umbrella, but it's gone. When she asked her little brother about it, he told her that she didn't bring anything home. And just as she's trying to process all of this, the TV flashes news about some bizarre time travel event. And then the doorbell rings. It's Zhan Yu. Bei-shing thought everything was finally going to be okay. Zhan Yu showed up at her place not to patch things up, but to return all her stuff. He also casually dropped the bomb that she shouldn't contact him ever again. Furious, Beixing snapped, "If that was the case, you could have just given me my stuff in school this morning." Zhan Yu, unfazed, replied that he hadn't gone to school because, well, he had burned his uniform after school yesterday. Totally impossible, according to Beixing. She accused him of lying, but before their argument could escalate, her brother appeared. He cheerfully invites his brother-in-law for some noodles. Zhan Yu, however, ignored him and walked away. Despite her brother's relentless questioning, Beixing stayed silent. She took the noodles he had made and retreated to her room, lost in thought. Why had Zhan Yu lied about not going to school? That's when her brain went full detective mode, recalling the whole time travel incident. She laughed at herself that it's not possible, but then a realization hit her. The last time she deleted a message, it started raining. Everything changed. Curious, she tried deleting another message, and the next thing she knew, she was back at school. Just as she was processing this insanity, Zhan Yu walked past, his friend teasing him. "Look, your shadow is here." Zhan Yu shut him up and turned to Beixing. "No matter how hard you try, you can't get close to me, so take your sad little face and stay away." Beixing didn't respond. She just watched him leave, wondering how on earth she had ever liked this arrogant fool. Later, as she walked home, nostalgia hit her hard. Everything looked so different. Even her house wasn't the same. And when she spotted Zhan Yu's pictures on her wall, instant rage, and she ripped them off. Meeting her mom, she hugged her tightly and blurted, "Wow, you guys look so young." Naturally, her parents were very confused. She then casually suggested her dad buy that beachside property because its price would skyrocket in the future. Her dad laughed. With what money? That's when her mom started yelling about his much-awaited promotion and whether Beixing was even preparing for her college entrance exams. Beixing, completely spiraling, shouted, "No, I am not taking that cursed exam again." The next day, they dragged her to the exam hall. With zero knowledge, she decided to pass time instead of the test. When she finally walked out, she sat at the bus stop and spotted Wen Sen. For no reason, she went right up to him, read his name tag, and struck up a conversation. But Wen Sen was internally losing his mind. "Hey, our bus is here, let's go," she said casually. Wen Sen, shocked, and asked, "Wait, how do you know this is my bus?" Beixing, smirking, told him that I had seen our class topper take this bus many times. "I know everything. Maybe you don't know me, but that's fine." But Wen Sen was happy and shy at the same time because this was the first time Beixing ever noticed him. They rode the bus together. Back home, her mom asked about the exam. Beixing ignored her and locked herself in her room. She wondered that if she deleted another message, would she return to the present? Just as she was about to try, her phone exploded with notifications, and suddenly she was back. She woke up to find her noodle bowl shattered on the floor. Her mom and brother rushed in, worried. "Did I fail my college entrance exam?" she asked, dazed. Her brother snorted. "Okay, you were a terrible student, but somehow you passed. But why are you suddenly asking about the old entrance exam?" As he cleaned up the mess, he casually added, "Just don't stress too much, okay?" As if he knew something was off between her and Zhan Yu. Later, Beixing got a message from Zhan Yu, telling your family about the cancellation of their wedding. She left him to read. The next day, life resumed its annoying routine. Kids at the zoo drove her crazy, and back home she spiraled into regrets. If only I had focused on my studies instead of Zhan Yu, my life wouldn't be like this. Determined, she Googled the 2010 entrance exam answers and started taking notes. The next morning at breakfast, she was still memorizing them. Her mom, puzzled, asked, "What are you even studying at 30? Beixing, dead serious, said that it was just an office competition. She locked herself in her room and actually studied this time, because she is going back to the past again, and this time she wasn't just going to pass, she was going to top that exam. Beixing had dozed off while studying when she was startled awake by a call from her workplace. Still groggy, she picked up the phone, only to hear her boss scolding her for being late. Panicking, she hurried to get ready, fumbling around in a half-awake state. As she tried to gather herself, more messages from her boss poured in, each one a warning that being late again would not end well for her. Overwhelmed and exhausted, she slumped into her chair. Then, a notification flashed on her phone, and she suddenly remembered something important, that she had to go back in time. Without wasting a second, she took a deep breath and quickly deleted the message. The moment she did, everything around her shifted, and she found herself back in the past. Blinking in shock, she looked around, trying to process what had just happened. Once the initial disbelief wore off, she immediately grabbed her notebook and started writing down all the answers she had memorized. At that moment, Tanji, her best friend, approached her. With a curious expression, Tanji asked how Beixing was managing to study with such intense focus, wondering if she had finally upgraded her brain. "Beixing," Overjoyed to see her friend again, couldn't help but comment on how cute and soft-skinned Tanji had always been. Tanji, looking thoroughly disturbed, stepped back and asked what was wrong with her. She then casually mentioned that Beixing was probably feeling down after confessing to Zhan Yu the previous day, only to be rejected once again. Beixing stared at her in horror and immediately asked if that had really happened. She then hurried to clarify that she no longer liked Zhan Yu and had no intention of wasting any more attention on him. Tangi, clearly unconvinced, gave her a doubtful look before walking away. Later, after studying for what felt like an eternity, she smirked to herself, determined that this time it wouldn't be Wen Sen who was taking the top spot. It would be her. Everyone gathered on the ground for a group photo. Students from both Class A and Class B were present. As soon as Zhan Yu arrived, all the girls admired his handsome looks. He moved to his designated spot, but some students pushed him toward Beixing. Since everyone knew that Beixing had a crush on Zhan Yu, they took the opportunity to tease them. Zhan Yu became irritated, and Beixing, embarrassed, also frowned. Hearing the commotion, the teacher arrived and scolded the students, especially those from Class B, accusing them of never being able to work peacefully. He further criticized them for wasting the time of Class A students instead of focusing on their studies. Beixing, a student of Class B, feeling defensive, questioned how the teacher could compare the two classes and argued that exams were not as difficult as they were made to seem. The teacher then challenged her by asking her to explain what preparations she had made for the upcoming college entrance exam. Without hesitation, Beixing started explaining the crow topic, confidently stating that it would definitely appear in the exam. However, the other students laughed at her claims. Annoyed, she warned them that if they didn't study that topic, they would regret it later, because she was damn sure it would come in the exam. Despite her confidence, no one believed her and continued mocking her. The teacher took the mic away from her, and Beixing hurriedly told Tanji not to forget to study that topic. However, even Tanji did not take her words seriously. On the college entrance day, Beixing entered the exam hall. She wrote down her answers because the questions were exactly what she had studied. She was the first to complete the exam and left the hall feeling extremely happy. After the exam, students began heading home. While on the bus, Beixing once again met Wen. As she nearly lost her balance, Wen Sen caught her just in time. She then proudly told him that the topic she had predicted did indeed appear on the exam. Hearing this, Wen Sen smiled. Beixing then asked if he could write the school topper's speech for her, as he did every year, but this time, she would be the one needing it, not him. Wen Sen, surprised, looked at her without responding. Instead, he pointed out an empty seat and suggested they sit down. The two of them then took their seats. Beixing arrived home feeling extremely happy. She excitedly informed her mother that she had done exceptionally well on the exam and was confident that she would get admitted to the best university. However, her mother remained skeptical, advising her to focus on passing first, before dreaming about university. Annoyed, Beixing asked why her mother always doubted her abilities. As the time neared 6:30 in the evening, her mother reminded her that her father would be home soon. Beixing sat down and started using her phone when suddenly, at exactly 6:30, something unusual happened. This time, she managed to see some messages related to the lighthouse incident before another time travel event occurred. In an instant, Beixing found herself back in the present. As soon as she woke up, she received a call from her office. Meanwhile, her mother scolded her, asking why she hadn't answered her ringing phone. Beixing realized that she had returned to the present, but nothing had changed this time either. Suddenly finding herself back in the present, she quickly rushed to her workplace, where the meeting had already started. She tried to quietly take her seat without being noticed by her boss, but that did not happen. Because of her mistake, her boss noticed her and scolded her harshly. During the meeting, the team was discussing what changes could be made to the zoo to attract more visitors. The boss presented a 10-year-old water activity and suggested that they should implement something similar in their zoo. Seeing this, Beixing recalled how she had once won a pair of shoes in a competition in the same event. She had taken them to Zhan Yu as a gift, but he had outright refused to accept them. She had then told him that at least he could accompany her on stage while she sang a song for him, but Zhan Yu had refused even that, saying that standing on stage with her would be embarrassing for him. He had left, leaving Beixing standing there, unable to understand why Zhan Yu disliked her so much. Lost in these memories, she was startled back to the present when her boss handed her the file for the water activity, instructing her to prepare it. Now he had ended up giving herself extra work. Later, as Beixing was working, she started thinking about time travel and why she had suddenly returned to the present. She remembered that the first time she had traveled back in time, she had returned to the present as soon as she came home after her college entrance exam. This time, the same thing had happened. She had come back right after finishing her exam. She realized that if this pattern continued, she would not be able to change her future. Just then, she received a message from Zhan Yu telling her that he had canceled their honeymoon tour and that she should inform her family about their breakup as soon as possible. Annoyed, Beixing thought about how she was already stressed about changing her future, and now, on top of that, she had to deal with these messages. After thinking it over, she decided to travel back in time again. As soon as she deleted the message, she found herself back in the past, this time 2 days before the college entrance exam. She saw herself once again offering the shoes to Zhan Yu, who refused to take them. But this time, instead of being upset, she threw the shoes away, saying sarcastically that she had not even intended to give them to him. Zhan Yu looked at her in surprise and walked away, wondering what had suddenly changed in her. As Beixing stood there alone, a water balloon accidentally hit her. It was thrown by Wen Sen, who immediately came over to apologize. She told him it was okay and then walked away. The next day, Beixing and her best friend Tanguy were walking together when Tanguy, as usual, couldn't stop talking about Zhan Yu. She went on and on about how perfect he was, an amazing basketball player, and in her words, so incredibly handsome that even the sun was jealous of his glow. Beixing, unimpressed, pointed out that while Zhan Yu might excel in sports, he was absolutely terrible at what truly mattered, studying. Unfortunately for her, Zhan Yu happened to be within earshot. Annoyed, he turned to her and remarked that before criticizing others, she should take a good look at herself, as she wasn't exactly topping the school rankings either. Hearing him, Tanguy finally said, "At least he acknowledged your existence." Beixing rolled her eyes. Then came the college entrance exam day. Again. Determined, Beixing tackled the exam with confidence, answering everything she had memorized. As she made her way home by bus, she silently prayed that she wouldn't be yanked back to the present before she could finally change her future. As usual, she ran into Wen Sen on the bus. He was still apologizing for the water balloon incident, though at this point, Beixing was convinced he was legally required to bring it up at least once every time they met. She told him he had already apologized enough, and that there was no need to keep repeating it. Noticing that he was listening to music, she asked if she could listen to anything to relieve some of the stress from the exams. Back at home, nerves began to creep in. She vividly remembered how last time she had been pulled back to the present at exactly 6:30. Watching the clock, she held her breath as it struck 6:30, then 6:31, and yet, she was still there. She had done it. She wasn't being dragged back to the present this time. Overwhelmed with joy, she felt confident that she had finally broken the cycle. However, just as she was celebrating, she received a flood of news notifications. Curious, she glanced at her phone, only to feel her heart drop. The text was about Wen Sen, the school topper who had jumped from the lighthouse and took his life. Beixing stared at the screen, frozen. Before she could even process what she was reading, the familiar force yanked her back into the present. Still in shock, she struggled to comprehend why Wen Sen would take such a drastic step. He had seemed completely fine when she last saw him. Something wasn't adding up. Then it hit her. She hadn't been able to change her future because Wen Sen's death was the trigger pulling her back. If she truly wanted to change her fate, she had only one choice. She had to protect Wen Sen and stop him from taking his own life. Just then, Beixing received messages from her mother, who was selecting a wedding dress. She felt upset, thinking about how sad her family would be when she told them about her breakup. So, she decided to go back into the past once again. She deleted the messages and returned to a time 5 days before the college entrance exam. Upon arrival, she asked her mother if she was still a senior high school student, to which her mother confirmed. Later, when her mother sent her to the market to buy some items, she was about to leave when she encountered Wen Sen. He grabbed her hand and started running, taking her along with him. Beixing noticed that he was running away from a red-haired man. Once they stopped, she asked why he had dragged her along and who those people were. Wen Sen explained that they were gangsters he had encountered at the internet cafe. He then asked if he should drop her home, but Beixing refused, saying she would go on her own. As she was leaving, she stopped for a moment and advised him to go straight home and stay away from the lighthouse. Wen Sen, confused, wondered why she specifically warned him about the lighthouse. The next day, a girl came to school while riding a bicycle to school. Her name was Gagi. She was the daughter of Beixing's class teacher, Min. However, their relationship was not so good, to say the least. Meanwhile, Tanji was persistently asking Beixing to attend the festival with her, assuring her that she would even ask Zhan Yu to join them. However, Beixing firmly declined, stating that Zhan Yu was not special enough to convince her to attend the festival. Unfortunately, Zhan Yu overheard this and approached Beixing, sarcastically saying that if she thought belittling him would grab his attention, she was mistaken. He added that even if she were the last girl on Earth, he would never like her. After saying this, he returned to his seat. In response, Beixing mockingly agreed, saying that she had no interest in him either. Zhan Yu retorted that she must have found a new target. Tanji, curious, asked if Beixing really liked someone else. To avoid further discussion, Beixing lied, saying that she did and that it was the school topper. Tangi, surprised, asked if it was Wen-sen and insisted that Beixing introduce her to him at the festival. Left with no choice, Beixing reluctantly agreed. On the day of the festival, Beixing regretted lying. Just then, she spotted Wen-sen and quickly approached him, asking what he was doing there. He replied that he had simply come to see the festival. Beixing then requested him to stay with her. Meanwhile, Tanji, who had arrived with Zhan Yu, saw them together and greeted them. She asked Wen-sen if they actually knew each other. Beixing confirmed that they knew each other well. Later, Beixing and Wen-sen were shopping together, while Zhan Yu bought snacks for Tanji. However, Tanji refused, explaining that she was on a diet. Zhan Yu teasingly remarked that, while you took great care of yourself, others kept gaining weight without realizing it. Beixing immediately understood that he was referring to her. When Tangi saw the water activity, she excitedly suggested they try it. Zhan Yu agreed and joined her. Meanwhile, Wen-sen brought water balloons for Beixing, but instead of using them for the activity, she threw one at Zhan Yu and laughed. Zhan Yu, irritated, asked why she was targeting him instead of the opposing team, but she ignored him. Eventually, one of the balloons caused Zhan Yu to slip and fall into the water, making everyone laugh at him. Furious, Zhan Yu shouted at Beixing. He demanded to know why she always embarrassed him in front of everyone, and why she couldn't just leave his life. Beixing stood silently, remembering that Zhan Yu had said something similar in the past, when she had asked him to walk with her on stage. At that time, he had said he would feel embarrassed to be with her. Even when she was trying to console him, he had once again said that being with her was humiliating. Feeling deeply hurt, Beixing walked away, sat alone, and became lost in her thoughts. Wen-sen approached her and asked if she was okay. Beixing replied that she was fine and told him not to worry about her, suggesting that he should go and enjoy himself. However, Wen-sen insisted that they go on the big Ferris wheel together. While on the ride, Beixing sadly remarked that perhaps she was so annoying that no one could ever like her. Wen-sen considered telling her that she was not annoying at all, but he chose to remain silent. Curious, Beixing asked Wen-sen if he would go back in time to fix the problems in his present life if given a chance. After thinking for a while, Wen-sen refused. He was mostly concerned about Beixing, who seemed deeply sad. The next day at school, when everyone was gathering for a group photo, Beixing approached Wen-sen and took a selfie with him, mentioning that they didn't have any pictures together. Before leaving, she once again advised him to stay away from the lighthouse and not even take that route. Wen-sen agreed, but remained puzzled as to why she kept warning him about it every time. On entrance exam day, once again Beixing successfully completed her test. She remembered all the answers well this time too. After returning home, she kept checking her phone, prompting her mom to scold her, telling her to have dinner first before using her mobile. Her mother also worried about her brother, wondering why he was changing so much. Beixing reassured her mom that in the future, her brother would turn out to be a great person. Suddenly, she received messages about the lighthouse incident again, when Sen had died once more. Shocked and devastated, she returned to the present, confused about how his death had happened again despite her warnings. She tried time traveling again, but no matter how many times she deleted the messages, she could not go back. That night, Beixing met the mysterious man again on the seaside and confided in him about her ability to time travel to another world, her past. However, no matter what she did, she could not change anything related to someone's death. The old man advised her that there would be confusion initially, but once she traveled at the right time, she would be able to change everything. When Beixing asked if he knew when that right time would be, he told her that he could not possibly know her secrets or problems. Then he left. Beixing soon received a call from her boss, who angrily reprimanded her for not completing a file that was due for submission that day. As a result, she was fired. Though she felt terrible, she still thanked him for everything else before leaving. Next, her mother called. Beixing hurried to the location where Zhan Yu was supposed to arrive with his girlfriend. Before Zhan Yu arrived, Tanji appeared. Seeing her, Beixing felt relieved and apologized for hiding her breakup, assuming Tanji had learned about it from the group chat. Tangyi, in turn, said she also had something to tell Beixing. However, before she could speak, Zhan Yu arrived and was surprised to see Beixing there. When he asked why she had come, she said she wanted to see his new girlfriend. Smirking, Zhan Yu told her to take a good look. His new girlfriend was none other than Tanji. Hearing this, Beixing was utterly shocked. She could not believe that both the most important people in her life had betrayed her. Holding back her emotions, she congratulated them and left in anger. Tanji, however, remained unaffected, dismissing Beixing's reaction as crazy. Later, Beixing was with her mother for the wedding dress trial, trying to tell her she could not get married, but her mother kept ignoring her until she finally shouted that Zhan Yu had broken up with her. Her mother was left in shock. Beixing walked out onto the road, crying as she thought about how everything in her life was going wrong. Eventually, she entered a cafe and started drinking multiple cups of coffee. Just then, Zhan Yu arrived. He was initially shocked to see her in a wedding dress, but quickly explained that she shouldn't misunderstand him. He had been sent by her mother to bring her back home. He suggested that they clear everything up in front of her parents, but Beixing refused. She firmly stated that she didn't want to talk to him in front of them and that he shouldn't get the wrong idea. She wasn't doing any of this to get his attention, she just needed some time alone. At that moment, Beixing's brother arrived. The moment he saw Zhan Yu, he became furious and tried to attack him, demanding to know how he had the audacity to hurt his sister. However, Beixing intervened, stopping her brother and urging Zhan Yu to leave. Later, Beixing was at home, receiving apology messages from Tanji. Soon after, Tanni sent her an old video of the two of them together. While watching it, Beixing noticed Wen-sen in the background. Someone was brutally beating him. This was the same red-haired person Wen-sen had been running away from in the past. A suspicion crept into Beixing's mind. What if this person had actually killed Wen-sen, and people had only assumed it was a suicide? As she sat lost in thought, her parents approached her, asking why she hadn't come out for dinner. They also wanted to know what had happened between her and Zhan Yu that led to their breakup. However, Beixing herself didn't know why he had suddenly left her, so she had no answer for them. Her father, angered by the situation, decided to confront Zhan Yu, vowing to teach him a lesson for hurting his daughter. The rest of the family tried to stop him, reasoning that acting in anger wouldn't help. Beixing, too, pleaded with her father not to go, realizing that there was no point in discussing anything when Zhan Yu no longer loved her. In a moment of desperation and all the chaos in the family, Beixing made a rash decision: to time travel once again. She deleted a message, and in an instant she was back in the past. This time, however, she didn't arrive just a few days before the college entrance exam. She had gone all the way back to the start of the semester. Realizing that she now had plenty of time to change her past, she felt a surge of happiness. Just then, she saw Wen-sen and immediately called him over to talk. Out of nowhere, she kicked him on the leg and, under the pretense of taking him to the medical room, dragged him away with her. Now, inside the medical room, Beixing directly asked Wen-sen about the reason for his death. She wanted to know if he had any enemies, or if he had any idea about what was going to happen to him. Wen-sen was utterly confused and thought, has this girl gone crazy? He couldn't understand why she was talking as if he were already dead. He insisted that he had no reason to die. At that moment, Beixing realized that there was still a lot of time before the lighthouse incident. She assured him not to worry, promising that she wouldn't let anything happen to him this time. She even vowed to protect him properly. Perplexed by her words, Wen-sen thought she was definitely a crazy woman and tried to leave, but she grabbed his ear and held him, warning that it wouldn't be good if he sent her back to the present. Just then, Wen-sen's classmates entered the room. They assumed that Beixing was bullying their quiet, studious school topper and quickly took him away. Beixing told them that she wasn't trying to bully Wen-sen, she was trying to save him. She was determined to change her future, this time, no matter what it took. Later, Beixing was waiting for Wen-sen outside the library. When Wen-sen arrived, she started forcing him to take some snacks, insisting that whether he believed it or not, he truly needed her protection. Wen-sen questioned why, insisting that he was perfectly fine, because of course, nothing says fine like a completely confused expression in a growing audience. Just then, his classmates arrived. Before Wen-sen could even blink, his well-meaning classmates whisked him away like he was some fragile treasure, leaving Beixing standing there, thoroughly unimpressed. Watching them go, she made a grand declaration. She needed to keep an eye on Wen-sen at all times. Determined, she marched straight to Wen-sen's class teacher, leading with the oldest trick in the book, flattery. She praised him as an excellent teacher, even going as far as to predict that he would become the vice principal in the future. Flattered and now mildly suspicious, the teacher listened as Beixing smoothly transitioned to her actual request. She wanted to transfer from Class B to Class A. Despite her expert-level flattery, the teacher shook his head. Not possible, he said. Beixing sighed, but now it's time for Plan B, if only she had one. Meanwhile, Beixing's own class teacher, Min, had overheard everything. He scolded her and took her away. They arrived at an office where, coincidentally, Wen-sen was already present for some other work. Teacher Min then told Beixing that if she truly wanted to transfer to Class A, she would have to rank within the top 50 in the upcoming exams. No one could change their class otherwise. Shocked, Beixing realized that she would have to study seriously to achieve her goal. Back in her classroom, Beixing was with her deskmate Chao, who noticed her unusual behavior. He remarked that she was acting differently. Normally, she only focused on watching over Zhan Yu, but today, she hadn't even looked at him. He then asked if she really wanted to transfer to Class A. Beixing admitted she did, but looking at the mountain of books she had to study, she felt discouraged. Just then, Zhan Yu, who had overheard their conversation again, taunted her. He said that no matter how hard she tried, she wouldn't make it into Class A. That class was reserved for intelligent students, not for a foolish monkey. Hearing this, Beixing rolled her eyes, and then Tanji rushed over to her and asked if she truly wanted to transfer. Tanji was worried about what would happen to their friendship if Beixing left, as they were best friends. However, Beixing gave her a cold look because she knew what Tanji will do in future under the guise of friendship. Beixing avoided talking to her properly and resolved to stay away from her as much as possible. Now, every day, Beixing had started following Wen-sen. She frequently forced him to take snacks, and if he refused, she would scold him. When school ended, she insisted on accompanying him home, despite Wen-sen saying he could go alone. The next day, Beixing entered Class A's classroom, bringing various food items for the students. She cheerfully announced that she would soon be their classmate and that the snacks were from her as a gesture of goodwill. Then she approached Wen-sen with an ice cream and pleaded with him to help her study, explaining that she needed to rank in the top 50 to transfer into his class. However, Wen-sen hesitated and made excuses, saying that Class B was good too. Wen-sen asked, "Then why do you want to come to this class?" But Beixing refused to explain further, as she had already told Wen-sen multiple times that she was transferring to Class A to protect him. Wen-sen just couldn't understand her reasoning. After school, Beixing forcefully took Wen-sen to a lighthouse. She believed that if she made him remember things related to his death, he might regain some of his memories. She asked him to close his eyes and try to recall anything, but Wen-sen said he couldn't remember a thing. When he tried to slip away unnoticed, Beixing caught him. However, this led to Wen-sen accidentally losing his balance and almost falling. Just in time, Beixing grabbed him and saved him. The experience left Wen-sen terrified. As he had nearly fallen, feeling guilty, Beixing kept apologizing non-stop. Later, Beixing sat alone, looking upset. Chao asked if she was worried about the exam, reminding her that she had to rank in the top 50 no matter what. He then mentioned that the monthly exam papers had already been printed and were in the teacher's office. Beixing immediately asked, "Are you suggesting that I steal them?" Chao initially denied it, but then nodded, saying that at this point, it was the only way. However, Beixing refused, stating that cheating wasn't right. Instead, she decided it would be better to ask Wen-sen for help. Meanwhile, Wen-sen was walking away when Beixing tried to stop him. But he didn't listen. He had spotted someone and hurried off. He was shouting and asking about Wen-sen, making Beixing shocked and confused to see him. The next day, Beixing was searching for something in her house, muttering to herself, "Where did it go? I kept it right here." Finally, she found what she was looking for, a red-haired wig. At school, students were arriving as usual, but Beixing stood there wearing the red wig, waiting for Wen-sen. Seeing her, other students started whispering about her strange behavior. Frustrated, Beixing scolded them and told them to mind their own business. Meanwhile, Gagi had also arrived at school, but a group of girls approached her ready to start a fight. Gagi was known for frequently getting into fights at school. When Beixing saw this from above, she came down and asked why they were fighting. Gagi coldly replied, "Mind your own business," and continued fighting alone. As she walked away, she glanced at Beixing and commented, "You're really weird." Beixing was left stunned by Gagi's attitude. Later, Chao called out to Beixing and took her to a secluded spot, revealing that it was his secret place. He even made tea for her as a guest. Beixing admitted that the place was really cool, but when the class bell rang, they both ran off quickly. Meanwhile, Wen Sen was also late, but since he was the school's top student, the teacher let him go without saying anything. However, he stopped Chao and Beixing, punishing them instead. She protested that this was unfair, but teacher Ming ignored her complaints. After dismissal from class, Tangji once again brought up the never-ending Zhan Yu topic, asking Beixing why she had stopped inquiring about him. Beixing, who had apparently mastered the art of selective hearing, chose to ignore her completely and walked away without a word. Outside, she finally spotted Wen Sen and immediately stopped him, dramatically holding up a red wig like it was a piece of crucial evidence in a crime drama. She asked if it reminded him of anything. Wen Sen, who was clearly not in the mood for guessing games, simply shook his head and denied any connection. Not ready to give up, Beixing insisted he dig deeper into his memory. Perhaps a recent fight? Or a threat? A dramatic showdown in a dark alley? Wen Sen, after giving it a whole 2 seconds of thought, casually replied that nothing of the sort had happened. This left Beixing momentarily speechless, which was quite a rare phenomenon. With a sigh of defeat, she finally patted his head and muttered that he was just too innocent for his own good and should go home. Unbeknownst to them, Zhan Yu had been watching the entire interaction like a disgruntled main character who just realized he was being replaced. His friend, always ready to stir the pot, pointed out that Beixing used to be glued to him, but now she was running after Wen Sen instead. This observation did not sit well with Zhan Yu, who responded with a glare so intense that his friend instantly regretted opening his mouth. Zhan Yu was starting to feel a little jealous seeing those two together. Meanwhile, at the bus stop, Beixing was busy convincing Wen Sen to help her with her studies, when she suddenly noticed the same gangster again. Thinking quickly, she shoved Wen Sen onto the bus and marched up to the gangster herself. She wanted to know who he was and why he was after Wen Sen. The gangster, instead of answering, found it hilarious that this girl was actually confronting him. He even made a little show of mocking her courage before trying to scare her away. When that didn't work, he put on his best villainous smirk and informed her that Wen Sen couldn't hide forever. He would find him soon and make sure he learned his lesson. Beixing, never one to back down, casually mentioned that Wen Sen had already left, so all his searching would be for nothing. This, as expected, did not sit well with the gangster, who instantly started fuming over how Wen Sen had managed to slip away from him yet again. The next day, the gangster had stationed himself outside the school like it was his personal lounge, making all the girls uneasy. Even Gagi, who spotted him from afar, looked concerned. Chao, who was with Beixing at the time, took this opportunity to offer some practical advice. He pointed out that if she was going to keep picking fights with gangsters, she should at least learn how to throw a decent punch. Who knew when that might come in handy? He even offered to teach her. Beixing, realizing the logic in this, agreed. At the same time, Gagi's friend approached her, equally confused about why this random gangster was hanging around their school. Gagi, for reasons best known to herself, chose not to respond. Before she could be questioned further, Teacher Min started walking in their direction. The moment Gagi heard someone mention her father was nearby, she decided that was her cue to disappear. Naturally, the gangster, perhaps inspired by her exit, also left the scene. Teacher Min saw all this unfold, but before he could stop his daughter, Beixing and Chao unintentionally blocked his way. This resulted in both of them getting a solid scolding. Beixing tried to explain that they were only practicing, but Teacher Ming wasn't interested in excuses and sentenced them to a round of running punishment. While Beixing was serving her time, Wen Sen showed up with a bottle of water, clearly concerned about her. Beixing, sensing an opportunity, teased him about finally caring for her, which surely meant he was ready to help with her studies. Wen Sen, caught off guard, insisted he never said that, but then added that he might help a little. That was all Beixing needed to hear to celebrate her small victory. Later, as she was walking with Chao after school, he casually mentioned that Gagi, Teacher Ming's daughter, wasn't exactly a fan of her father. Also, as it turned out, Wen Sen was Gagi's neighbor, which meant they had been childhood friends. Beixing noticed the same gangster who had been looking for Wen Sen earlier. She quickly told Chao to leave and marched straight to confront the guy. If he wanted to fight Wen Sen, he'd have to go through her first. That was the rule now. The guy, completely unimpressed, scolded her for interfering where she wasn't needed. Then, since she was so eager to help, he gave her a message for Wen Sen. Meet him at his repair shop that night or face the consequences. With that, he walked off, clearly expecting her to deliver the message. Beixing, however, had other plans. Instead of telling Wen Sen, she decided to show up at the repair shop herself. There, she saw the guy with his friends, looking like they were up to no good. Then, all of a sudden, they received a call and hurried off somewhere. Beixing, unable to resist, followed them, only to discover that they were causing chaos at some location, demanding money and breaking things. Later, the same guy went to a bar and drank way too much. Beixing watched all this unfold, realizing just how dangerous he really was. The next day at school, she told Chao everything, explaining how she had somehow ended up in an experiment competition with this gangster. Chao, understandably confused, asked what kind of experiment she was talking about. That's when Beixing explained the previous day how the guy had challenged Wen Sen to an elephant toothpaste experiment, but she had stepped in and decided to take Wen Sen's place. If she won, the gangster would leave Wen Sen alone. The only problem was that she had no idea how to actually do the experiment. Luckily, she remembered seeing Wen Sen do it before, which meant there was a chance he could teach her. Chao, however, pointed out the obvious. Wen Sen wasn't exactly going to agree to help that easily. Beixing groaned, realizing how hard she had worked just to get him to agree to study with her. But Chao assured her he had the perfect plan, one so good that Wen Sen wouldn't be able to refuse, no matter what. After that, Beixing was sneakily tucking a romantic novel under Wen Sen's desk, glancing at him, and musing about how incredibly handsome he was. Unfortunately for her, Wen Sen chose that exact moment to wake up and demand what she was doing there. Without missing a beat, he handed her a paper to solve, hoping to be of some help for the upcoming exam. But Beixing announced that she was far more interested in learning the elephant toothpaste experiment from him. Wen Sen pointed out that they would need a lab for that, which was currently off limits to students. Beixing, however, was more interested in his reading choices. She dramatically pulled out the same novel and teased him about it, leaving Wen Sen in a mild state of horror as he scrambled to explain that the book wasn't his. Seeing that she was about to expose him to the world, he made a split-second decision. It was better to risk breaking school rules than his reputation. And just like that, he agreed to teach her the experiment. Later that night, the two found themselves sneaking into the lab. Wen Sen patiently demonstrated the experiment step by step, and after what felt like an eternity, the elephant toothpaste was finally ready. Beixing, in her excitement, took an ill-timed step backward, directly into Wen Sen's personal space. Suddenly, his heart was doing a drum solo because, unbeknownst to her, he secretly liked her. Unfortunately, this sweet moment was cut short when the security guard decided to make a surprise appearance, following the noise. The two, now seasoned fugitives, ran for their lives. The next day, Beixing arrived at a secret location for a competition in Wen Sen's place. This did not go unnoticed by Gagi, who was there, and she wasted no time in questioning why Beixing was helping Wen Sen. What was he to her anyway? Beixing, unfazed, declared that she was his friend and therefore his protector. The gangster entered the scene and the competition began. Both contestants were intensely focused on their experiments while Chao sat in class, praying for Beixing's victory. Wen Sen, meanwhile, burst into the room in full panic mode, realizing there had been a mistake with a chemical in Beixing's experiment. But before he could warn her, Chao told him that Beixing was already competing against that gangster. Wen Sen's shock was so intense that it practically echoed through the halls as he rushed off. Meanwhile, the gangster successfully completed the elephant toothpaste experiment, while Beixing's mixture refused to react, leaving her increasingly stressed. With his victory secured, he smugly announced that he had always known he could pull it off, just like them. It turned out that his name is Meiji, and due to financial struggles, he had been out of school for years, yet his knack for experiments remained strong. As Wen Sen arrived, concerned, immediately asked Beixing if she was okay. Meiji, now in full dramatic mode, turned to Wen Sen and sarcastically questioned whether he had no shame, sending a girl to compete on his behalf. Regardless, Meiji was the winner, and now he had a more pressing concern: winning over Gagi. With confidence, he asked if she would finally be friends with him. Gagi, unimpressed, rejected him outright, declaring that he was still no match for Wen Sen. As she walked away, Meiji, desperate, followed her, demanding to know why she kept turning him down despite his best efforts. Gagi, unimpressed by his persistence, gave him a challenge. If he had the guts to break the windows of the school, especially her dad's office, she might consider it. Meiji, now caught between his conscience and his crush, hesitated. Gagi, seeing his uncertainty, smirked and taunted. "What's wrong? Are you scared?" before striding away. Meanwhile, Beixing turned to Wen Sen, realization dawning on her. So this was why he had been so troubled. His so-called love rival had been giving him a hard time, all because he mistakenly believed Wen Sen had feelings for Gagi. Wen Sen said that he didn't need anyone's protection and advised Beixing to focus on her studies. Saying this, he left without waiting for a response. Later, Beixing, who was outside the class, met Zhan Yu, who asked why she hadn't been attending classes lately. Beixing replied that it was her choice and told him to mind his own business. From a distance, Wen-sen saw them talking while he was on his way to give Beixing some study material. Since everyone knew how Beixing used to follow Zanyu around, Wen-sen felt a bit down seeing them together and quietly walked away. After school, Beixing followed Wen-sen, but he ignored her. She asked if he was upset because she had competed in his place. Then, out of curiosity, she wondered aloud whether Meiji had only misunderstood or if Wen-sen actually liked Gagi. Hearing this, Wen-sen, in anger, stated that it was true. He did like Gagi because obviously he was jealous, and then stormed off, leaving Beixing standing there in shock. The following day, all the students gathered on the ground. When Gagi was talking to Wen-sen, Beixing, watching from a distance, started wondering if Gagi became Wen-sen's girlfriend, Meiji wouldn't stay quiet and might try to harm Wen-sen. She even suspected that Meiji might have been the one who pushed Wen-sen from the lighthouse. Determined to keep Gagi away from him, she decided to act. After that, Wen-sen waited in the library for Beixing, even bringing snacks for her, because he was feeling guilty that he had lied about liking Gagi. He wondered what Beixing must be thinking about him. Just as Beixing arrived, Wen-sen tried to confess that he had lied the previous day, but before he could say anything, Beixing pulled out photos of all the talented girls in school and started showing them to him, suggesting that he should date one of them instead of Gagi. Wen-sen, annoyed at the fact that Beixing was pushing him towards other girls while he actually liked her, got angry and walked away. Beixing ran after him and asked why he was so upset. She then tried to explain that Meiji was not a good person and that Wen-sen should stay away from him or else Meiji would keep troubling him. She even suggested that they pretend to be in a relationship so that Meiji would stop bullying him. Wen-sen, hearing this, felt a bit happy, thinking that even if it was just for show, at least Beixing was calling herself his girlfriend. Agreeing to the plan, he showed her the snacks he had brought. Beixing took them without hesitation, saying she would keep them now, and walked away, leaving Wen-sen smiling at her. The next day, Gagi wasn't feeling well and was checking her fever, but her father, Teacher Ming, paid no attention to her and instead told her to hurry up or she would be late for school. Hurt by her father's indifference, Gagi watched as he left while talking to someone on the phone. Meanwhile, Wen-sen was waiting for Beixing with dumplings so they could go to school together. When Teacher Ming saw him, he asked why Wen-sen wasn't heading to school yet. Wen-sen casually replied that he was waiting for someone. As he stood there, watching other boys passing by, he tried to style himself like them, hoping to impress Beixing. After waiting for a long time, when Beixing finally arrived, Wen-sen became extremely happy and eagerly offered her the dumplings. Beixing thanked him, but then, to Wen-sen's frustration, introduced him to another girl. She was still trying to push him towards someone else, hoping he would forget Gagi. Wen-sen, irritated by her constant matchmaking, got annoyed and left in anger. Later, Beixing approached Wen-sen to apologize and asked if he was still upset with her. Before Wen-sen could respond, a group of girls arrived, wanting to befriend him. Wen-sen, realizing that Beixing had called them too, became even more annoyed. Frustrated, he told Beixing that if she didn't want to study, she shouldn't ask him to tutor her again, and with that, he left. But that night, after finishing his work, Wen-sen started preparing a study plan for Beixing, still worried about her. At the same time, he felt guilty for speaking rudely to her. The next day, the students from Class A were in trouble because someone had broken their classroom windows. Everyone suspected Chao because a student had seen him outside the school the previous night. Even though Chao denied it, no one believed him. Beixing, however, stood up for him and argued that they couldn't accuse someone without proof. Just then, Wen-sen arrived, and Beixing asked him to confirm that Chao wasn't the kind of person to do such a thing. Wen-sen, however, replied that his words wouldn't be enough to prove the truth. One of the students then asked how they were supposed to study in a classroom full of broken glass. Beixing suggested that they exchange classrooms with her class until the matter was resolved, but on the condition that no one would blame Chao without proper investigation. The students agreed, but Beixing was annoyed at Wen-sen for not supporting her. Later, Beixing tried to convince her own classmates to agree to the class exchange, but they refused. Chao told her to drop the matter, but she insisted that if any of them had been falsely accused, she would have stood by them too because they were all classmates and should support each other. Her words convinced Zanyu first, and one by one, the other students also agreed.